If we haven't met yet, my name is Ana Lopez. I'm a sexologist, sex coach, and smut consultant. I'm the owner of Sex and Spanglish, as well as the hostess of this podcast that also goes by the same name, Sex and Spanglish. Sexologist Me is currently completing a dissertation on what it means to be a Latina and a sexual being at the same time. And in the near future, I'm going to be interviewing states-based Latinas about their sexual experiences through the eyes of a Latina. So stay tuned for any updates on that. If you're looking for a Latina sex coach, you can work with me one of three ways. The first is La Sinvergüenza Symposium, which is my 12-month group coaching program uniquely made for Latinas. Second, Textual Healing, which is my one-on-one coaching program done completely via app-based messaging. And then there's Operation Orgasm, which is my online independent study course that teaches you everything that you need to know about having mind-blowing sex on demand, even if your partner doesn't know what the hell they're doing. All of the program information to any of these programs and their respective links are located in the show notes of this episode. If you write sex scenes, we need to talk, as I'm currently accepting consulting clients. I work with readers to avoid getting canceled and to stop perpetuating sex negative narratives. Authors, talking to you, y'all have the best intentions, and some of you are still perpetuating sex negative narratives, and I want to help you stop that. So you can download a free copy of How to Write Sex Positive Sex Scenes Without Boring Your Readers using the link in the show notes of this episode. My vision for my business and the work that I do in the world as a sexologist, sex coach, and smut consultant is to pave the way for the Latina woman to live a life sin vergüenza by embracing their individual sexuality and their Latinidad at the same damn time. My mission with Sex and Spanglish is to provide culturally relevant sex ed that centers the individual and their personal desires and values while shifting the sex negative narratives that pose as a barrier to true guilt-free pleasure. There are only three things that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand: an understanding of your body, the ability to effectively communicate that, and the skills of rest and rejuvenation. I teach you all of these in Operation Orgasm, my online independent study course. So if you're interested in that, there's more information in the show notes of this episode. So I say these things all the time. I talk about these three things every chance that I get on my social media, in my email, and I get a lot of objections. So today I want to go over the objections that people have told me, and I want to talk about how those objections actually are obsolete. They don't change my mind, one, and two, they actually don't change the fact that there are only three things that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand. So let's get into it. People who disagree with me say that, well, I have to feel safe. And to be clear, I'm only ever talking to people who are in safe relationships. I wouldn't be telling you how to have mind-blowing sex on demand with a person that you don't feel safe being around or having sex with. That makes zero sense. So I trust you to know if this episode or any of the information that I apply or that I share applies to you. I also want to share a quick story. So you may find, especially if you have had sexual trauma of some kind, you may find that even with a quote unquote safe partner, that you have some type of nervous system response when you're having sex. And even though your partner is safe, they're amazing, they treat you well, you find, and you want to have sex with them and you're like, it's enjoyable, you find that sometimes maybe your nervous system is responding. So you might find yourself like tensing up. You might kind of feel maybe some type of like asco or like de repente, right? Or you kind of just want to pull away. And I want to say that that is normal. Like there's nothing wrong with you. It is quite common, especially if you've had trauma. And I would offer that usually this happens when you've had some type of trauma. Like it doesn't just happen to happen typically, especially if you are with a partner who historically has been safe and treats you well and all of those things. But we can account for this when working together. There are nervous system exercises that we can do to get you feeling more regulated. in other words, safe, right? Which allow you to enjoy sex more. Another argument that I hear is, what if I'm on medication? Now, side effects can happen with any medication. There are always side effects that are possible for you to have, and they can be managed. You can potentially change your medication. You can potentially add supplements to offset the side effects. And we can work together to help you to decide what path is best for you and your unique situation. Now, I am not a doctor, right? I'm studying to be a doctor, but not a medical doctor, PhD, not MD. So I do research, not science, medical stuff, right? But we can talk about what alternatives you might have and talk about how we can get you enjoying sex despite the side effects. We can talk about having conversations with your partner about what's going on for you so that they're not left in the dark. We can prepare you to talk to your doctor, to ask for what it is that you want, to let them know, hey, I'm having these side effects. Hey, I don't want to take this medication anymore. Hey, I want an alternative medication, whatever that might be. I can help you get really clear on all of the facts and what you want to do with those facts, right? We will debrief after the conversation with your doctor and with your partner, particularly if it doesn't go how you thought it would go. And we can navigate changing health providers and partners if that is necessary, right? So medication does not have to be an obstacle for you enjoying mind-blowing sex on demand. It is still available to you. Another argument that I have or objection that I get is, what if your partner doesn't listen to you? Now, this question can go into conversations about consent and assault. And I just want to say that no means no, period. Even if you've already said yes, or you've already started having sex, I don't give a fuck if they're about to come. You can say, I'm done. You can say no. At any time, you can withdraw consent at any time. I'm going to do a whole other episode on sexual assault and what that constitutes, because I think that a lot of people are experiencing assault and they actually don't know that they're experiencing assault and or abuse. And so I'm going to do a whole other episode on that. So stay tuned for that. But for now, no means no. And for the purposes of this episode and this talking point is, I'm talking about folks who are having the experience where their partner doesn't take their desires or sexual preferences and or pleasure into concern. So when they're like, well, what if my partner doesn't listen to me? It's something of you tell them that you want them to go down on you and they don't do it. Or you tell them you want sex more or less and nothing changes. Or you tell them you want more foreplay and they do it for a little bit, but then they go back to the usual, right? So that is what I mean when I'm saying you have a partner that doesn't listen to you. And I also want to say that it's totally possible that you have been having consensual sex this entire time and you have a partner or have had a partner who doesn't listen to you. Sometimes it is about your partner, right? Sometimes they're just for lack of better explanation, dicks, right? And they're not listening to you. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But sometimes it's less about your partner listening and it's about how you are communicating that. Now, this isn't to place blame on you, but we do want to take responsibility for how we are communicating with people, because effective communication is key. I always see and hear on social media of communication is key. No, it's not. Because communication is just it's coming from your brain and just saying it out loud. It's just coming out of your mouth. That's not necessarily helpful. Effective communication is key. It needs to be effective. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter, right? Let's get clear before I continue on what effective communication even is. Effective communication is emotional regulation, self-awareness, and having your own back. So let's break each of those down. Emotional regulation is the ability to have emotions. We all have emotions, by the way, without ignoring them or letting them control you. So this looks like being mad at your partner and allowing yourself to be mad without saying things that you're going to regret later. It means not ignoring those emotions and acting like you're not mad and distracting yourself from being mad. So going out with your friends or, something of that sort. It's literally allowing yourself to feel the feelings that you're having because feelings are meant to be felt, not ignored. It means letting them rewind. Emotional regulation means having emotions and not letting them control you. So when you are letting emotions control you, that means doing things to stop being mad, right? So maybe you seek revenge or you yell at them or you're throwing things. These are things that you would kind of deem like toxica, and it's like a joke. It's like a little like hee now kind of thing. If you are showing up as toxica, you are letting your emotions control you, which means you are not emotionally regulated, which means you are not having effective communication. So it makes sense if you have a partner that doesn't listen to you because you are not effectively communicating. Okay, the second pillar of effective communication, self-awareness and understanding of your thoughts and emotions, right? Understanding what is it that I actually am feeling? What emotions am I having? Where do I stand on this thing, right? If someone were to ask you questions about what your thought process is and all of that, and you're just like, oh, I don't know, then you can't be having a conversation about it because you don't actually understand your own thoughts about it first. You need to be clear on where you stand before you have a conversation with somebody. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't know where you stand. The third thing is having your own back. This means owning your own experience even when others don't understand. It means the willingness to walk away. So whether that's from the conversation, the relationship, it also means the willingness to meet your own needs and desires, right? It means, and everybody else outside of you is secondary. Like you are your primary provider for yourself emotionally. I want to state that it is, so actually, to summarize, effective communication is emotional regulation, self-awareness, and having your own back. And I want to state that if you realized in this that you have not been effectively communicating, it's okay. It's okay if you don't know how to communicate effectively or you haven't been communicating effectively because it wasn't modeled for most of us. And this is probably news to you. You're like, oh shit, I thought I've been effectively communicating this whole time and it turns out I haven't been. That is okay. It makes sense that you don't know how to effectively communicate because it wasn't modeled for you. It wasn't modeled for me either. I had to learn this shit on my own. And I can help you learn to effectively communicate. If you're having shitty sex and it's not feeling good for you, you can effectively communicate that with your partner. It doesn't have to stay that way. And you don't necessarily have to leave the relationship either. Having a conversation doesn't actually equal leaving your partner, contrary to popular belief. That is an option, but it's not the only option. If you want to do something new in the bedroom, so you want to add toys or a threesome, or you want to open the relationship, you can learn how to effectively communicate that to your partner. If you're not having enough sex or you're having too much sex or there's an initiation issue, I can help you to learn how to effectively communicate that. If you are experiencing low libido, you have no desire to have sex or low desire to have sex. There's a significant change, right? Maybe you used to be like a horn dog and now you're not. I can help you to effectively communicate that both to your partner and to your doctor, right? If that's something that you're like, oh, I think I actually need to go to the doctor for that. You can have that conversation. I can help you have that conversation with your therapist because I know some of y'all are seeing a therapist and it's not a sex therapist. That's a whole other thing. But if that is something that you want to talk to your general therapist about, we could talk about how to have that conversation. Because your sex life definitely does impact other areas of your life. And if you're already seeing a therapist for a specific topic, maybe your relationship, for example, we can talk about how do I talk about sex to my therapist? I can help you do that. So the next objection that I get is I'm going through perimenopause or menopause. Hormonal changes can impact your desire for sex and even the way sex feels, but that doesn't mean it can't be enjoyable. It's not a death sentence. We cannot change the fact that you're going to go through what it's called, the change, right? So menopause. We can't change that. But I can help you navigate the impact the change is having on your sex life, the relationship to your body, and the relationship with your partner. The reality is that menopause doesn't just cause internal changes, so like hormonal fluctuations, right? It also can cause the appearance of your body to changes your body odor. It changes the way that your hair looks, right? It changes so many things. If you have ever been pregnant, I want you to imagine all of the changes that happened. Similar things can happen with menopause and with perimenopause, right? So, which is pre-menopause, right? Leading up to menopause. It is the process by which your body is going from not being in menopause to, it's like the transition from not being in menopause to menopause, that is perimenopause. But the changes to your body, both internally and externally, can result in a lot of mental turmoil that ultimately impacts your sex life. Maybe you haven't gone through menopause or perimenopause just yet, but I bet you can relate if you've ever had any physical changes happen to your body or even internal changes, right? So whether you've had maybe significant weight gain or weight loss, or maybe just like body changes, right? Maybe you stayed the same weight, but your body changed in some way and it was visible to you. Maybe the way your clothes fit changed, right? That can definitely have an impact on your relationship to your body. Pregnancy, injury, illnesses that left you with scarring or other physical changes. You don't have to go through this change alone or any change alone. And I can help you navigate through this. We'll work through the grief that these changes bring. We'll strengthen the relationship that you have with your body. And we'll find your updated, unique orgasm technique working around your current symptoms, because the way that you orgasmed pre-menopause may not be the same. It might be, and that's great. But it might not be. But that doesn't mean that you can't orgasm anymore. You can't have enjoyable sex just because you have menopause. So again, perimenopause and menopause are not a reason. Like, they still are in alignment with the three things that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand, which again is an understanding of your body, the ability to effectively communicate that, and the skills of rest and rejuvenation. The next objection that I get is, what about mental health issues? Your mental health can definitely affect your desire for sex, but that doesn't mean you can't have and enjoy sex. And another argument under the mental health issues is like, well, my medications cause side effects. And I want you to go back and listen to my earlier point about medications. My answer to the medication provided for mental health issues is the same for any medications being used to treat any other illness. We can work around that. Sure, it might cause side effects. Sure, it might cause issues, but that doesn't mean you can't have enjoyable sex. I refuse to just lie back and let your sex life die because you are on a medication that you can't get off of. There are ways to work around that. And to be clear, I am not a therapist, and I've gone into the difference between the two. So in between coaching and therapy on episode 32 of the Sex and Spanglish podcast. And there are specific reasons why I didn't become a therapist. So I will probably do an entire episode on that in the future. But I do want to say that coaching is a great supplement to therapy. And many of my clients have mental health struggles. So I work with a lot of clients that suffer from depression and anxiety, from postpartum depression, who suffer from PMDD, who suffer from PTSD, right? CPTSD, right? Chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. And a vast majority of people do suffer from some type of mental health issue, even if it isn't diagnosed. And my coaching is not going to manage your mental health struggles. That's what therapy's for. However, it is going to take them into consideration when helping you enjoy your sex life. Sinvergüenza. Right? Your mental health issues do not have to be a reason for you not to enjoy sex. So again, there are only three things that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand. and understanding of your body, the ability to effectively communicate that, and the skills of rest and rejuvenation, and mental health is not outside of that. Another argument that I get is, well, I have kids at home, or I have kids, like in general, but usually it's like kids at home. Having your kids at home can impact when and even how often you have sex, but that doesn't mean you can't still have a great sex life. There are plenty of parents that have kids at home that have amazing sex, independent of how old their children are and how many they have. And the idea that just because you have kids at home, you're going to have a shitty sex life for a while, that's a really common misconception that like gets fed into. Like, who said? Like, sure, does it make things a little more challenging than if you had no kids? Like, sure. But like, does going on vacation, is that a lot easier when you work part-time versus full-time? Sure. But does that mean that just because you work full-time doesn't mean you go on vacation? No, it doesn't. Right? So same concept here. Your kids don't have to be a reason why you don't have sex. And we know that that is true because other people are having sex when they have kids, and we know this because people have multiple children. So presumably y'all had sex again at some point with the child in the home or multiple children in the home, because some of y'all have more than 2 children, right? So it is not a death sentence. You can still have an enjoyable sex life with your kids at home. Quit buying into this bullshit idea that just because your kids are at home, you can't have an enjoyable sex life. That is not true. The problem is that you're going to your friends who have the same exact problem for advice, and then it just turns into a vent session rather than a solution-oriented discussion, right? So you feel seen. Like, this makes total sense, by the way. I'm not judging you. But you're going to your friend and you're like, dude, like, you know, we're about to have sex, and then like the baby woke up, or like whatever it was, right? And it turns into this like discussion about like, oh my God, and then this happened, and this what happened to me the other day, and blah, 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 blah. And you feel good in the moment because you feel seen. You're just like, oh, someone gets it. Someone understands what I'm saying. Like, that feels good. But then you go home and you still feel shitty because the problem is still there. So this is where I come in. Our coaching sessions are always going to be solution-oriented. We're going to get you to an understanding of your problem, right? Because that feels really good and it helps you to bring in compassion so you're not being like an asshole to yourself. But we're not going to waste time venting and complaining because that doesn't get you anywhere. And we will get to work and find solutions that actually work to solve your problems for good. So not only are you going to get some feel good, like little dopamine hit, but you're also going to solve your problems, which feels even better. The next objection that I get is, well, there's other family members at home. So maybe it's not children, maybe it's adult children, maybe it's, you know, your in-laws or whoever, right, are at home, they're living with you or they're staying with you temporarily. And my answer to this is very similar to those who use kids as an objection, right? Like, having adults at home does not have to stop you from having an enjoyable sex life. And the reason why we know this is true is because there are many individuals that have multi-generational homes. So it's like the couple and then their kids, and then maybe like their sister or brother or cousin, whoever, or maybe their parents, right? One of the wife's parents or whoever, right? There's multiple generational homes that continue having children. So somehow y'all are still having sex, right? So it doesn't have to stop you from having an enjoyable sex life. The only thing that is stopping you is you. And I can help you get out of your own way. So let's talk. The next objection that I get is chronic illnesses and or disability. My answer to this is very similar to my answer regarding medication. You may not be able to get rid of the symptoms you're experiencing, and you don't have to. I understand they're not pleasant, but like, they're there, and sometimes there's nothing that you can do about them. The work I do with my clients works with and around the symptoms that you're experiencing, no matter where they're coming from. It doesn't matter if it's a chronic illness. It doesn't matter if it's like a new illness that you've never had before, or it's a new disability. Maybe you were born with a disability, right? Like, none of that has to stop you from enjoying your sex life. And it is a vast misconception that just because you have a chronic illness, you don't live in an able body, that you can't enjoy sex in the same way that the typical person would. And that is simply not true. That is bullshit. The last objection that I get is, and I want to put a trigger warning here because I'm going to briefly talk about sexual assault, but not in depth. So just an FYI, is trauma. That is one of the big objections that I get, particularly sexual trauma, but this can be trauma of any kind. And almost everyone has trauma. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Even though it may not be sexual, almost every single person on this planet has trauma of some kind. But I digress. Trauma does not make you destined to have shitty sex forever. It does not make you destined to avoiding it altogether. Plenty of people who have had trauma of some kind, particularly sexual trauma, can and do go on to have amazing sex lives. If you feel that your trauma is stopping you from enjoying sex, then let's talk. You might need to seek therapeutic support. Even if you've already seen a therapist, it may not have done what it was supposed to do. This could be because the relationship that you had with a therapist, it just wasn't a good match, and that is okay. That happens all the time. It could be because you saw a general therapist, or this one grinds my gears, but like a church counselor instead of an actual licensed mental health professional. Instead of a certified sex therapist. That could be the cause, but I won't know unless I talk to you. So let's definitely have that conversation. Feel free to DM me on Instagram at Sex and Spanglish. You can also send me an email, anna@sexandspanglish.com, and we can kind of talk about what is coming up for you, and I can give you kind of my guidance on where to go. And if you're in need of a therapist, right, particularly a sex therapist, I can definitely connect you with one of my colleagues who are therapists, or, we can find someone for you on the ASECT website. That said, you might also be in a place where coaching would be more effective, even though you obviously, like once you have trauma, it doesn't go away. You learn to live around it. But you might be in a place where coaching would be more effective. Many of my clients come to me after therapy, and they're in a place where, their trauma is being managed, but it's still, impacting their sex lives, and they're not getting much further with therapy. And so in that instance, coaching is more effective. I actually covered not the difference. I covered, when is therapy appropriate and when is coaching appropriate in one of my episodes about therapists. But you should not be seeking sex support from a general therapist. And please, for the love of all things holy, do not seek a church counselor who is not a mental health professional for sex support or support around a sexual trauma of some kind, or even if it's not a trauma, even if it's just like basic sex shit. You need to look for a sexuality professional. If you're looking for a therapist, you'll want to see a certified sex therapist. You can find one on ASECT. That is AASECT. You could just Google their website and you can find a professional in your area. There are a lot of folks who do provide virtual care. But again, you can always reach out to me. I'm always happy to connect you with a colleague or another therapist in my network of people. So quickly, I'm going to go over these objections again, just to remind you. Again, there are only 3 things that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand. That is an understanding of your body, the ability to effectively communicate that, and the skills of rest and rejuvenation. If you have to feel safe, if you are on medication, if your partner doesn't listen to you, if you are going through perimenopause or menopause, if I will also add to that, now that I'm remembering, I will add to that, like I have PCOS or endometriosis. If you have mental health struggles, which who doesn't at this point? If you have kids at home, no matter the age, if you have other family members or friends, roommates, etc., other people living in your home or frequenting your home, if you have a chronic illness or a disability, if you have trauma of some kind, which a vast majority of us do, particularly sexual trauma, none of that matters in the sense that you still only need 3 things in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand. an understanding of your body, the ability to effectively communicate that, and the skills of rest and rejuvenation. None of those things that I just mentioned should hinder you having mind-blowing sex on demand. There are ways to work around it, and it is okay if those things are hindering you now, because the world wants to tell you otherwise. The world wants to tell you that you have to live in a perfect body that never gets sick, that never hurts, that you should, you need to be off of medication and be having green juice and blah, 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 blah. Have, just you and your partner at all times, and like live in this perfect bubble that doesn't fucking exist in order for you to have enjoyable sex. And that is not true. No, it's not feasible. And it's also not true. You can have a really chaotic life and have amazing fucking sex. And I want to help you do that. So reach out to me at anna@sexandspanglish.com. You can also book a quickie call using the link in my show notes. All relevant links will be in the show notes per usual. And I will talk to y'all soon.